Hey guys, our guest today is the president for a global powerhouse and technology leader in DC fast charging solutions. He is presently a NeoCharge Board member, a home charging device company, and also advises for privately held startup AmpUp that focuses on software to schedule and manage energy for EV charging in commercial and residential applications. Starting his career at Intel, he has held various computing-related sales and executive positions, including CEO of BLNK Charging. He continues to advise for a number of investors in clean tech startups in transportation, energy, and microgrid technologies. Welcome to the show, President of the Americas for Tritium, Mike Calise.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm really excited about this.
Why couldn't I fly out to California and do the interview with you at your new digs, man?
Well, I would love to have you. It's a little overcast today, but it'd been beautifully sunny and 70 degrees on the coast of southern LA here in Redondo Beach, right next to our facility in Torrance. And you're welcome anytime.
I'm giving Mike the little jab here because I love California. It's beautiful, especially the spot that he's at too. But he's also a graduate from the University at Buffalo, which is just down the road from where I'm recording this interview, and he's out in California. He spent 4 years in Buffalo, so it's got a little place in his heart. And I just wanted to make sure our guests kind of see that connection as well before we dive into kind of what you've been working on.
Well, I've been appreciative. I was rooting for the Bills to get to the Super Bowl, but I love Buffalo. It's a great town. I'm proud to say I'm a Buffalo alumni, and along with former CEO of Intel, Bob Swan, who just stepped down. So, hopefully I can carry the torch for UB. Go Bulls.
Yeah, the Bulls, hey, they won it a couple years in a row, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, their basketball team's doing well. Their football team just won it. They had that Hawaii Bowl a couple years ago, or last year. Someone I actually interviewed is their radio commentator, so he got to go out there and experience Hawaii and watch them win the championship. Pretty cool.
Fantastic.
UB Bulls. You guys can check out Tritium at tritiumcharging.com. We have the president of the Americas right here, Mike Calise. Thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
What I'd like to do is bring your story all the way back to the point when you started to, I want to say even as a boy, did you have a love for automobiles? Was that something like a father or grandfather? Just were you under the hood? Was that kind of the lifestyle you had? Was just learning about cars as a youngster?
Yeah, well, growing up, I grew up in the North Shore of Long Island in New York, 35 years there, in a sort of middle-class America suburb, born in Brooklyn. And frankly, my dad moved out of town into, better horizons in the suburbs. And it was a great town. I'm still proud of my roots back in Smithtown in Port Jefferson, Long Island. When I was younger, we were always tinkering. And I look back now and I still tinker. I still make stuff. I'm still quite inventive. And I try to keep my sort of mind and hands very active. So we had mini bikes, at the very young age. I would tell my father that my best friend's parents approved his mini bike. And then he would tell his father that my father approved the mini bike, and eventually we got them both to give us permission, and we were constantly rebuilding those things at a very young age.
Good thing the parents didn't hang out and get coffee and say, "What?" And he told me that you said it. No, you said it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they knew it, but they let us negotiate. They were teaching us a little skills there.
You would have got home and they would have been sitting there waiting for you, right, with the wooden spoon. I mean, you're paisan, so.
Well, you see, we were much harsher. God bless my passed away mom. She didn't stop at wood. She went to the metal lasagna spatula, and that was all she had to do was wave it, and we knew we had to stand in line.
Unbelievable. Podcasting is a great way to engage with your audience and stay consistently relevant. The only problem is you don't have the time or desire to produce your own show. You simply want it done for you, and that's where Social Chameleon comes in. All you need to do is press record and upload the files. We'll handle the rest. From planning, production, post-production, distribution, and digital marketing, we have you covered. We realize that times are tough and funds are tight, and Social Chameleon believes in building supportive business relationships. By clicking on the link in this promo, we'll provide you 7 free podcasting tips to get started, as well as a free 30-minute online consultation. This is the perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs, keynote speakers, industry experts, influencers, and anybody who has a personal brand. With Social Chameleon, we help you build a brand that is out of this world. We're ready and waiting, so what are you waiting for? Click on the link to get started today. Mike, I did not know that you were born in Brooklyn. Very cool story, because my mother was also born in Brooklyn, so that has a place in my heart. So you were in Brooklyn. Also, I know after Buffalo, you mentioned you were in Jersey with Intel, and then went out to the West Coast. So it's not like you're afraid of the East Coast by any means. You're just enjoying the California lifestyle right now.
Correct. The Silicon Valley is the draw. I spent 23 years in Silicon Valley, doing a lot of computer-related sales activities and marketing activities. And what is a great piece of new Brooklyn information is, just as of 2 days ago, we went public with the announcement that Tritium is going to be part of the largest universal DC charging port in the Americas.
Yeah, so no big deal. Just a small email announcement. No big deal.
Yeah, right in Brooklyn. So very proud of that. Plus, of course, Grimaldi's and Roberta's, which one's got better pizza. So amongst the DC fast charging and the pizza, there's plenty to talk about.
I love it. Yeah. So you were saying that as a kid, you did have an interest. You were always taking apart cars, and it started with like the dirt bikes, and then eventually got into vehicles like cars. Or even into one thing I remember from our first call. I wanted to make sure we shared it. Was you actually corrected me, because I thought that the electric car was more advanced than the gas powered car. And you had mentioned to me, well, of course, but I remember a conversation about actually before we designed a gas powered vehicle, there was a vehicle that moved by electricity, nothing close to what we have today. But I think most people would get that trivia question wrong. What actually was created first, gas or electric? And electric actually was first.
Yeah, basically back in like 1900, even previous in the late 1800s, the technologies for electric vehicles were innovative. They worked. Right. They worked well. And then it was kind of a battle between the gas-powered and the electric vehicle. And there's a whole history around that. Mm-hmm. Eventually, gas-powered did quite well for obvious reasons. There was oil company involvement as well in the fueling of that. But when you look now and you fast forward, 100 years plus, you actually see correlations almost identical to when gas-powered vehicles disrupted horse and buggy. And this is a lot of people don't quite realize this, but it took about 13 years in New York City to go from predominantly a horse and buggy means of transportation to a vehicle means of transportation. And it took only 2 decades to take the entire United States and convert that. And there's great things to talk about how long it takes for those disruptive innovations to take over. And here we are in the beginning of the second decade, and that's when the fastest growth is of the adoption. So it takes a while.
Beginning of the second decade?
Exactly. In the beginning of that S-curve. It takes about a decade to figure it all out. But in that second decade, 80% of that disruption actually happens. And then the last...
So you guys we're way past the tipping point. That's what, 3%?
Yeah, we're effectively in the tipping point. If you want to round the numbers, and depending on who you talk to, Bloomberg or me or others, we're in the tipping point on 2019, 2020. And that means to me, what's the tipping point? Meaning there's really no going back. I mean, you can talk about different definitions of tipping points.
It's like Netflix.
There's no going back.
A lot of people thought, no, that's not going to work out. We're so used to having the disc in our hand. We got to put it in the machine, and we got to go back and forth. Who's not able to do that? And then all of a sudden, they're like, well, if it's on my phone and my girlfriend wants to watch something and she just wants to press a button and I don't want to go drive to the place, maybe it's okay. All of a sudden your mentality, you start to get used to things, and then that tipping point becomes the new norm, and then it just gets greater. So you said, I want to make sure I understood this, it took about 100 years for mankind to the evolution of the horse and buggy to gas powered to really become the primary mode of transportation, and it's taken about 20 years. I know electric cars have been out for longer than 20, but to kind of evolutionize what you're doing today.
Yeah, let me clarify a little bit. Horse as a primary means of transportation goes back to ancient years.
Right.
It only took 13 years to flip the horse as a primary means of transportation to the gas-powered vehicle.
I got you.
So that's just in a decade, virtually a little more than a decade.
So that was the like once gas powered became a thing, and people were starting to, what's the word I'm looking for here? Where
adoption.
Yeah, not even the adoption, but just kind of made it more readily available. Because when there's something that's a concept, okay, there's this gas powered vehicle, it's a concept, but it went from concept to something that, you know, your neighbor's driving down the street now and you go, I want one of those. And
what it took was four things. Yeah. It took the technology, so Ford. Mm-hmm. It took a manufacturing scale. You couldn't just make these by hand. It took infrastructure. You had to build out the roads, and you had to build out the fueling infrastructure. And then what's interesting, it had to actually take business model innovation. It actually, the advent of the car loan. And when you put those four convergent concepts together, then you have that massive rush. It's not much different than the digital smartphone.
Right.
As it took out the analog phone. It's not different than the flat panel display, how quickly it took out TV or digital photography, how quickly it made film photography obsolete. These are what's called disruptive innovations. Yeah. And when you fast forward to where we are today, the electric vehicle is really dependent on a few things, two things mainly. The cost of batteries, because the cost of batteries is directly related to how much distance you'll get out of the vehicle for a price, and the amount of electric vehicle charging infrastructure that's put in place. And that's what Tritium is a world leader in, is in very high-powered DC, very fast charging infrastructure. When you put those two converging technologies together, when you're able to create innovative DC fast charging and deploy those rapidly as infrastructure, that's really first, it's really important. And at the same time, you're seeing battery costs come down to the point where you're almost at cost parity in just a couple of years. You're already at cost parity at the luxury sport class, Tesla versus others. But for the mainstream, you're only a few years and a couple of years away from cost parity. Then it's lights out. I mean, it's game over. There's no more profitability in gas-powered vehicles. And that's why you're seeing all of the car companies and now all the truck companies move very rapidly toward that, because if they don't, they're frankly going to go out of business.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly what I was looking for, is kind of identifying what are some of the hang-ups to really make that break through that brick wall where, you know, we could talk about how EV is already a thing of today. It's a thing of even the last 20 years, really. And even going back into the 70s, there were electric cars, right? People
in the
had
90s,
them on leases.
You know, the GM1 is the 90s and the second coming. That was like that. I say that was the activist years. And now today it's the capitalist years.
Yeah. Implementing it to reality more so.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you mentioned a couple hang-ups that are now getting to the point where the argument against EV is like almost like totally suffocated, right? Like you guys are already pushing through to that point. So can you put a timeline on when you feel like, you know, in 1995, certain people, more elite people, would have access to text messaging and phones? It was texting people didn't even know much about it, even when it existed in the beginning, because a lot of people laughed at it. Why would I text someone when I can just call them? And now, like, almost everybody texts over calling. So there's that flip in paradigm, right? That mindset shift. So when do you think that is the reality for EV?
Sure. So right now, if you look at the sport luxury class of what Tesla's done, let's say above the 75,000 to 100,000 level, competed dramatically against the usual competition in that area for ICE. But the real breakthrough comes when you start to come down in price, because then you have affordability to the masses. And the masses determine the mass market, obviously. So that's what you have to go win. So Tesla's advent of the Model 3 and the Model Y are absolutely pushing now down the middle. And the middle now is viable game for EV. So you're starting to see, great response from GM, the Chevy Bolt with a B. It's a great car. People love it. It's got a great performance for the price, et cetera. So you're starting to see that middle class happen. But the real benefit happens when you start to get down to the 20 to $30,000, and even below. If you look at the average car that's bought, it's actually not somebody goes out and plunks $35,000 on a new vehicle. Most people actually buy a used vehicle and they run it into the ground for 8 to 10 years, and it fully depreciates, and then they go buy another one. That's really the market that will change things. And we have this concept at Tritium, which is really about what we call application-specific vehicles. So today, the battery costs are such that there's highly competitive EVs at the high end and the mid-range. And in a very short time, to answer your question, just a couple of years away, a year or a couple of years, we're almost there today, you're going to start to see a massive influx of very competitive $25,000 to $35,000 vehicles, which of course will be, picked up by many families out there. But you're also going to see something that is maybe never heard of. And that is, even today, if you look at China or India, for example, you can actually buy an EV at under $10,000. And today in America, we're not quite there yet, but you can buy a limited range vehicle with 4 wheels that's NHTSA safe.
Basically, we're talking about your starter car, 18-year-old kind of, driving, like what would be, it was the Cavalier for years, was that car.
It was the Cavalier.
So now
I could buy one for my daughter. Absolutely. Buy a new car for my daughter instead of a new car, let's say, knowing she's not going to get past about 100 miles, which is good for a father. And, I think there's going to be a great opportunity for a complete wave of takeovers. So we're literally in the next 5 years, a major transformation of what is ICE to EV. And then, of course, I know there's a lot of listeners out there that are saying right now, well, what about my F1, my F-150, the number one most popular vehicle? Well, guess what? Ford's already announced. And other than some supply challenges, which is natural for a new high volume launch, we're going to start to see mainstream pickup trucks go EV, and they have some great products out soon with Tesla Rivian, Lordstown, GM with the Hummer. That thing is cool, but it's a little high end right now, and Ford with their class. You're going to start to see a major move even in the pickup class.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for enlightening and bringing that, because, I know there's a fine line of talking about what's happening and what you can and cannot say, and I appreciate you delivering on the things that you can talk about. You mentioned resale value, and that it's many people are in the mentality of, hey, a $45,000 car, right? If you get it 2 years old, you might be able to get it for 30. That's gas powered. Is that similar in resale value? Like a Tesla, what is it? The S series, I think they call it the S model, right? So the Tesla S model goes for about 65, right? Somewhere in that range.
And up a little, a little higher.
Depending on what you get, there's like different versions, like every other car. So we're talking 60 and up. And so if I get a 2018 with reasonable miles on it, what do you think something like that would go for our audience that may be interested in that? Yeah,
well, the first thing is these fluctuate, but what I can say is that Tesla's resale values have held tremendously. Like Mercedes is a great example. I've had an S-Class Mercedes at one time in my life, amazing car. And I bought it because, well, the justification is I really loved the car and it went fast and it was luxurious. But the justification was always, hey, the resale values always held. And Tesla and the EVs, resale values are holding really well. And what I'm hearing now, and it's not approved yet by Congress or the new administration, but what is on the docket, on the agenda, is actually some subsidies for used cars. So what you're going to start to see is a lot of the EVs that are coming out of their original ownership are going to be able to be picked up with a benefit of a rebate on that. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for the equitability of EVs, which at one time were always considered, too far reaching, only for the affluent. Now you're starting to see the used car market as well as the middle range market. And that was what I was talking about, making this accessible to all Americans. That's really when you get a massive movement. But that still says that the infrastructure has to be built out in order to meet this demand.
Right. Like
And
the charging stations and the
Exactly.
accessibility and who's going to have, I know, like I was interested in just looking at Tesla a couple of years ago, just to maybe even take one for a run. And it wasn't very easy to do that. You got to order them. Anything that's brand new with them, you have to pre-order them like 2 years ahead of time. So that is not something that's for the everyday average American. And when this country is really built on the middle class, when the middle class is all playing ball, doing this kind of on the level playing field, that's when it's really, you're way past tipping point. You're into this being the thing. And your buddy tells you he's looking at a new vehicle, and chances are he's now considering an EV opposed to, just the F-150 of yesterday.
Right.
So,
and it's a lot easier to buy those cars now as well. Tesla sort of rewrote the book on the dealership model, but the dealers are reacting well. There's a new plan with Cadillac and the Lyriq. Now, of course, that's a high-end car. It's an awesome-looking car, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
They're promoting it now on the new controversial but super funny Will Ferrell commercial, which I think is fantastic, and it's going to get a nice banter going, a global banter, which is perfect. Yeah. But what we're starting to see is these cars are
right. Get people talking.
Absolutely, and these cars are getting a lot easier to buy, to the point where people are buying them online, and they're doing that with internal combustion engines as well, with the trust that there's great companies out there that'll deliver great services. You can buy them online, very low risk, fully money back guarantees. So we're starting to see all those impediments kind of removed, but the biggest impediment is still the deployment of EV charging solutions, which effectively is like that early days of infrastructure build out from the horse and buggy. You've got to put accessible DC fast charging everywhere, as well as charging at home for those people who have a single family home, and charging in commercial locations, including publicly available locations as well as the workplace. And when you do all that, you'll start to see a tremendous amount of uptake in EVs. And that's the biggest challenge now, both with the administration as well as with the suppliers of these chargers, which is also this phenomenal opportunity. So that Tritium sees in front of it.
Essentially, there's the slingshot mentality where the industry is most likely going to lose a lot over time because they got to put all the charging ports in and just make things easily accessible. So setting up the infrastructure is just not only time, energy, you have to get guys to build it, the expansion of it, the expenses, everything to build that infrastructure. And so it's like a slingshot. And then once it's built, the rocket ship launches, right?
There's a little of that, but there's also, like I always said, we'll never get it right where we perfectly balance the amount of infrastructure required for the amount of vehicles on the road. But that that's still okay. So what'll happen is, a great example is what I've witnessed in San Jose Airport 10 years ago. A few chargers were put out there, they were never used. Fast forward a little time, then a few EVs were on those chargers. Then fast forward further, they were saturated, so you had to put more chargers in. And then they sort of leveled out until more cars came, and then they filled up. And then you put more chargers in, and then more cars came. So you sort of never got the balance perfectly right. You always either had too many cars that couldn't get a charge or too many chargers that weren't being utilized. But eventually, and if you go there now, you see every charger being filled. And you see about 100 EVs that did not get charged. So what that tells me, now this is California, it is in a certain very high EV adoption market. Yeah. But that's sort of that's giving you the roadmap for what everyone else will experience. So what you start to see is the really important requirement of DC fast charging, because you can get cars in and out of those stations and get very high utilization. So airports are a perfect example of an AC charger. You're there usually for overnight. For a long day, but you can see that those people can't get their charge. So you're starting to see this massive deployment of DC charging, both city-to-city corridor charging, as well as inner-city high-density, high-population charging, which is just the recent announcement in Brooklyn. So it takes both. It takes, it's not a chicken and egg anymore. Everyone talks about that chicken and egg. You'll hear about it today. It's a self-fulfilling spiral up now. The more chargers you put in, the more people say, hey, honey, let's buy that car. It's safe to go on the water. I can charge. And then the more people buy those cars, the more demands are put on charger companies like us. And even when our competition puts out a charger, I give them a like on LinkedIn or Facebook, because I know that if they put that charger in, there's going to be 10 more cars that are going to put demands on my chargers.
It's pushing the demand. It's pushing the demand.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a self-fulfilling spiral up. We're no longer in chicken and egg.
Yeah. If there's no competition, then the whole industry is behind. If you generate competition, then there's plenty of room to go around in this industry.
Absolutely.
There's so much growth that is there. The growth potential is so high that you want to see, hey, if more people, like if I had a pizza joint and no one is eating pizza yet, and a guy downtown Buffalo puts a pizza, and now all of a sudden people are thinking about pizza, and I put one 10 miles away, I have a better chance, right? That people are talking about it or wanting it, right?
So you had to bring up pizza again, so now I'm starving because
I'm talking about
Brooklyn pizza, Buffalo pizza, which is of course my other passion. But my first passion is definitely EV charging.
Well, we're paisans. We got to talk on food. That's how we understand.
Absolutely.
I could just picture it. I almost picture like, when there's a camera put on something, it's time lapse. I was picturing like the charging ports. What you're talking about is like there's a time when there are more ports than there were vehicles, and then all of a sudden it got to a point where they were all filled up, and then you had too many vehicles, not enough ports. And it's whenever you bring a product to market, you have that little bit, and you can't take 1 month to look at something and feel you have it all figured out. It takes years, especially with something where you're talking about changing a huge paradigm about the way that this is being accessible to the everyday man. It's not something that's going to be a couple months, even a couple years. It's taken decades, but it's so darn close right now. You can taste it, and I can feel it in your energy that this isn't something that I'm going to be waiting for my grandchildren to experience. This is something I'm going to experience, hopefully, God willing, in my lifetime. Here's what I want to do, Mike. I brought you on the show to educate us on EV. You've done that. There's more that we can get to as well. So I'm not telling you to not go down that road, but I want to bring the man on this show who's done what you've done. And you started, obviously, you got into the industry, but you've been executive vice president, you've been president, you've been CEO. You're currently president of the North American at Tritium. You are a guy who has consistently found yourself getting to the top of an organization, and you belong there. Most importantly, I want to talk to our audience, people that are either working within an organization, or maybe they're their own entrepreneur and they're looking to just continue to better themselves. What takeaways can you give someone to get to where you're at? What are just some things that they can continue to do to get to that level?
Well, I'm profoundly humbled by that, and thank you for that. And I really appreciate it. And in giving back, and I do this a lot, and these are why the named young companies and the people I advise for today, because I do like to share that experience. And I would say a couple of things come to mind. One thing comes to mind, and this is really important for engineers, and I'm an engineer, but often engineers may not have the ability to put themselves in the other person's shoes. And it's a simple concept. It's effectively called empathy. And if you're able to develop your empathy early on while your engineering brain is maturing, and your empathy or your IQ brain is maturing, but your EQ, emotional quotient, is maturing. One of the great ways to measure that is how empathetic you are. And I wasn't always that way. Look, I designed this. This is the best. Listen to me. This is the way it's going to be. You'll like it. That's not too empathetic. But if you're saying, what's going on in that person's mind? When that person said no, what were they thinking? They weren't, I'm not taking that personally.
Sure.
I'm learning from what they said and constantly reincorporating that back into your business strategy or your product. And I always felt that that's important. And I think that's one of the things I could say has helped me make it a little easier to get to these levels of leadership. Because in as much as I'm able to engineer a solution, I'm able to engineer an emotion and tie it to a product. And when you're able to get the visceral passion of what drives people, and you're able to deliver a product that inspires them to do great things, I think that leads to great things, and that also puts together great products. So I would say that's important for people in everyday life.
That is a mic drop moment right there. I just want to make sure we pause and understand what Mike just delivered. I actually put 4 stars around it, and I put a big square around it. Understanding emotion. It's something that's going to serve you well in sales and business leadership and lifestyle leadership, being a leader in your home. Understanding emotion. If you are talking with someone and you don't really understand where they're at, and they tell you yes, no, maybe, whatever it may be, take out the garbage, and you don't understand where they're at, and you give a different response, people pick up on that. That's why if you just keep selling and you're not actually listening or feeling, and that goes for a business, if you're not listening to the market, you will fail. If you're not paying attention to how people are reacting to certain things, you will fail. And so you're talking about how you got to the top, and I was expecting all kinds of, I would do this, maybe this, and you're saying, hey, let's back up. Understanding the emotions of people on the team, the engineers need to understand the business side of things. People that are in, like the VP of sales, need to understand what's important to their engineers, right?
I think you did a great summary there, and there's a perfect example where even in today's businesses, the bigger you get, what happens is the siloing effect, right? Marketing doesn't know how to really market this product. And, what do sales guys know about this product? I have the best product in the world. And then sales guys can't always just listen to their customer. They have to have the vision about what their customer needs, and then dialogue, and then listen to the dialogue, and then self-improve. So you made a really great statement there. And at the end of the day, no matter what we're building, like, Starship rocket, the next, best-in-class cell phone, the coolest, newest EV or autonomous vehicle. It's people who transact. It's people who serve humanity. And at the end of the day, the reason why a lot of us are in this EV business, or in the solar business, or in the microgrid business, or the wind or renewable generation business, is because we truly fundamentally believe that we can change humanity for the better. It is that sort of a vision that keeps us waking up every morning and trying real hard. And that was the second point I was going to make as to the sort of key to success. And that is taking every bad day, every difficult challenge, every what is seemingly an impossible moment where you sit there and go, this is impossible now. We did the math. We figured it out. It's impossible. And whenever I would ever say that, I would say, no, it's not.
Yeah.
We just haven't figured it out yet. So
do you know who that reminds me of? That's Henry Ford.
Interesting.
Did you ever read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill?
I haven't.
Okay. It's one of the, it's kind of like the business Bible. And I know I was never a reading type guy ever. Until I got into business and found that, man, there's knowledge out. There's no shortage of information. If you want to get ahead, you have to not only get the information, but apply it. That's a whole nother story. But he tells the story of Henry Ford and how basically he goes to these engineers that are working for him at Ford, and they say they couldn't create the latest, greatest, whatever the motor was in the car.
Right.
And look, the engine, I'm not very technical when it comes to vehicles. That's why I'm letting you do most of the explaining on it. But they said, Henry, it cannot be done. It doesn't exist. What you're asking us to build has never been built before. We cannot do it, like you just said. And that happens in other industries, obviously. And he said, don't come back and report on this until it's done. And they literally were like, we don't even know how we're going to do this thing. Well, would you believe it? They built the damn thing.
Just figured it out.
Because he knew that those 4 guys or whoever was on the team, if they put all their little notes together and kept grinding away at this thing, the magic was going to happen. He just knew that he needed to not give up on it.
Enzo Ferrari, I think that, to quote your guy, he was the one who originally quoted, it's like, what can be conceived can be created, right? That was Napoleon. And something along those lines. Certainly Disney, Walt Disney, true to that. And Elon Musk, there's no question Elon Musk. And one of the things that I look at in running BLNK, which was effectively taking a small microcap, working with the founder who's capable of amazing things, and working with him together in partnership to turn around what was, a tough situation. I mean, a long story, but those assets were defunct assets. They failed. The BLNK assets had been a government-funded prior situation that effectively got scuttled. And so we had to turn that around. And now that company is valued over $2 billion 5 years later. So what we would do is look at fundamental principles like, and Elon Musk is a master at it. And I think almost that same story when someone said you can't really build a car with batteries because they did the math and it didn't seem to pencil out. You wouldn't get the range for the price.
Right.
But when you take things down, and I do this today, and I did it in my highest level of leadership, when you take things down to their fundamental principles, and I challenge my team every day to solve these problems, and it's like, think out of the box. It just doesn't, don't collapse. Don't come to a solution right away. Just say, what do you have to deal with here? What are we dealing with here? I get inspired by that movie, Martian, with Matt Damon. And there's a great example. Every problem seemingly was impossible, but every problem ultimately has a solution. And here we are, we're going to Mars, okay, in real world right here. Within X years, like really close, depending on who you talk to. And it's because all of these problems are capable of being achieved, but you have to have an open mind. You have to have that attitude going in. If you start to lament for 1 minute, and sometimes just get it off your chest. I tell my guys, lament, grieve it, feel it, wake up the next day if it takes you a full day, and then put it behind you. Because it's now a distant memory in a memory bank somewhere. It doesn't exist in front of you. Stay in the now, look forward, and create effectively solutions for every problem that's thrown your way, every grand challenge. I went into this 10 years ago and said, I started a little advisory firm and like it was to solve grand challenges. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? But if you use that mentality, you can do it. And then you can always rely. Everyone has it in us as humans. You can always rely on your survival instincts. And often it comes to that. And survival of an entrepreneurial business. Am I going to fail? Am I going to run out of capital? Is my product going to die? Take those as learning experiences. You want to fail. I
was going to say, the question of, am I going to fail? I mean, absolutely. You're going to. So you better keep moving because you're going to learn, adapt, grow, change. I just interviewed, had an awesome interview with Jordan Stoltz right before you hopped on this. And she's the founder of Mikado, which is a fashion stylist company that she's doing actually in your neck of the woods out in California. And she was massively hit by the pandemic because her business was meeting people, bringing $100,000 wardrobe to them, having them try things on, listening and feeling and understanding the emotional state of of her client. And then all of a sudden she's like, you can't go to people's homes. You can't go to people's businesses. Well, guess what? She's still doing well. She transitioned in the pandemic to do things virtually. It's still not exactly the same, but she's able to do things differently now. And it forced her to have a new line of business once the pandemic kind of runs its course and she can get back to those in-person wardrobe moments. She can still also do the virtual stuff and have this exceedingly more expansive business that she wouldn't have had without adversity. So adversity is what causes people to think, learn, adapt, change, and grow.
Exactly. Richard Branson had a great quote. He's like, when a toddler learns how to walk, he doesn't read a book, and he doesn't have his parents saying you have to walk. They walk and they fall down. They pick themselves up and they fall down and they walk. That's how you learn how to walk. So the falling down part is actually critical. So as long as you don't get, don't take life too seriously either. A lot of people who know me, I can be a fierce competitor out there, but people who know me also know I can have fun, and I want people inspired to have fun at what they do, making sure they're not under that severe pressure, and knowing what it's like to be in battle, and it's tough, but don't take it so seriously. Wake up with a fresh mind, and I think those two key points are really important to me. In my growing up in my career and still now, and I'm sure it's going to continue to scale. I'm learning more now And I am learning more now at a much more rapid rate than I ever have in my career. And how cool is that?
And I know why. It's because you're willing to. You're not closed-minded. You're saying, I'm not going to throw your age out there. I don't know it. And you don't have to reveal it.
I'm proud to say I'm 60. I just turned 60. I don't know what that number is, but I rode 60 miles on the Strand, on the Redondo Beach Strand here on my cruiser bike. But I still don't know what the number is. Sure. But I think it's a good milestone to say, be proud that you're still here
and 60,
still making an impact.
You're learning, you're making an impact, and you're willing to say, hey, you know what? Just because I'm 60 and there's some guy that's 35 telling me about some new technology, you're going to say, all right, you're going to understand emotion. You're going to take in what he has to offer. You don't have to agree with everything, but you're not going, don't want to talk to you. Who are you? You're nobody.
100%.
You're not going to be where you're at with that mentality. So I wanted to make sure we get that out. The other thing I don't want to launch too far past is the fact that anyone with children can totally appreciate this. You mentioned the 2-year-old or the 10-month-old that keeps walking and falling and walking and falling. Kids are the most persistent, aren't they? Like if my daughter wants candy and I say no, I mean, she'll ask me 74 times until I finally say yes. I mean, I should give her a business card and she can come work with me. But kids are the most persistent, but they're not afraid of getting no, because they just know that, okay, well, I'm going to get it at some point or whatever, right? So I think that was just a small little thing that I wanted to hit back on. What I'd like to do with the last few minutes here is get back to the entrepreneurs listening, the business leaders, those that are aspiring business leaders, to learn from you and take those years and years of business leadership that you have and all the courses and kind of the accumulation of knowledge that you have and put it into a couple summarized statements. One being, we talk about leadership. What are some of the greatest qualities you feel that make a leader? You've been around them. You're one of them yourself. What are the qualities that people really need to work on to be a tremendous leader?
Sure. I think it's important to, using the empathy as the platform, it's important to be able to communicate your thoughts effectively and also to share and understand when people are communicating their thoughts to you. And what that often, and it sort of maybe sounds a little cliche, but communication is really, really critical. At the end of the day, what do we do as humans? We go places, so we like, and we talk. So like we walk and we talk at really base level. That's what we do. So if you hone your skills in communicating, and what that means is listening, but also saying, and I'm the classic idiot when it comes to this. I am always, what did you just mean by that acronym? Can you help clarify what you just said? Most people think, they're going to make me seem stupid. I have no idea what that person just said. I'm just going to hold back and make it look like I understand. Well, you just missed a learning opportunity.
You're not going to understand it at all if you don't even say, hey, let me.
And then you might miss it. So communication skills are very important, and being aware of what you might not know. Today I know what, you can, use a stimmy, okay, to make a tendy, all right? I know what that means today, okay? A lot of people are making big bucks trading stonks now. Now you say, what is all this stuff?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? I'm open-minded to what I call the NGs. We're the OGs, the original gangsters. The NGs are the new gangsters. And the 20-something and the Zoomers, the Zers, the Millennials, their minds are so sharp right now. Their ability to process data and recollect patterns is amazing. People are at their best when they're growing like that. So I want to always know what they're knowing. Now, I bring a little wisdom, a little extra experience. Sure. But again, the open mind to communicate is key to leadership. And also the ability to strategize. I would say this, I use military analogies all the time, not because I'm actually, sort of anti-war kind of guy. But I use military analogies because to capture something, whether it be a market or to control a situation, a theater of operation, or other business type challenges, you use strategies. And the first thing an entrepreneur should know is you better know the definition of strategy. And you can ask an entrepreneur, what is a strategy? And they don't have, I don't know. And so, you have to have a strategy, look it up, Google it, embrace it. Often it comes from military-like strategies or, community civilization-like strategies. Do you take on a competitor on a frontal way, on a head-to-head battle? Do you flank them from the sides? Do you encircle them in an encirclement strategy by bringing up partnerships? You see, there's all sorts of analogies I use. So whether you like the military analogy or not, or the sports analogy, I love using sports because it's a microcosm of the world.
Pizza for a whole nother episode.
Well, we'll do that. Whatever your favorite is, you have to have a strategy.
Right.
And the reason is, if without a plan, you can't execute. Without a goal, you can't. You don't have a plan. So as a leader, you set your goals. Literally set the goal of what you want to be. Maybe there's a vision on top, a delivery of that goal, an objective. How do you attain that goal? And a plan behind that playbook, or management by objectives of how you're going to execute that strategy to attain your goals, to deliver on your vision. And frankly, that's it. If you have the ability to communicate like I just did, to communicate that,
articulate it, and
articulate it, you can do pretty well. That and bribe people with pizza every now and then, you'll do well.
Mike, let's not overlook what you just said. You just unpacked it so much. And guys, go back and listen to that one more time, because there were a lot of takeaways. But some of the key things we talked about is understanding the emotion of who you're talking to. That's people on your team. That's your target market. My audience have to understand what you guys are looking for as well. Also, we talk about qualities of leadership, right? And, you just hit home on so many of those. And then you wrapped it up with saying communicate effectively. And at the end of the day, if we have a brilliant idea in our head and we're not able to communicate it, it's really hard to get other people behind it, because they're not understanding where you're coming from. So even public speaking and presenting, if you're listening to this episode right now and you feel that that's a struggle for you or a challenge, go do Toastmasters or whatever, so you can work on some of those challenges, so you can learn how to articulate effectively, like Mike has been able to do to get himself. And look, we're two paisans. We want to call everything the thing, and we're not mostly the most articulate guys. You could see him stumbling over my words now. But at the same time, when we're in a business meeting, we need to know what the people in this room need to understand, so they can make an educated decision to go forward. And that until everyone has the right information, I learned that as not a sales technique to be salesy, but if someone is saying no, and they may just not have all the information. So I literally learned to say, do you feel you have all the information to make
that's a great question. Do you feel? Yeah.
Because if you feel I didn't deliver on something yet, maybe you have a question about XYZ. We didn't talk about it yet. You're going to say no based on something. And then all of a sudden you know what they need, and then you can go and handle it. And
there's different types of leadership too, and it's important to make the distinction. First of all, most people actually really fear public speaking. So what I just described is, just communicate is not so easy. But what you have to be able to do is not worry about your embarrassment in learning. If you let it all hang out and learn, again, a baby doesn't get embarrassed when they fall down; they just get up. And if you're don't be your own worst enemy. And I think when you let that go, you can get some closet, externalizers and that can come out of you, even though you might seem a little sheltered on the surface. And then there's also a multitude of different types of leaders. Even Elon Musk, as an example, he's not a great orator. He's a little awkward when it comes to these canned speeches, and he has to launch these products because he's a CEO. He's just a brilliant mind in engineering, solving product problems. And then when he has to articulate that, it's a little tough to articulate it. But he's worked hard at that, and he's a spokesman for not only the car companies, but for the most innovative technologies in what is effectively an energy and transportation literal revolution and a transformation of this in the next 10 years. So here's somebody who continues to work on communication and is able to manage leadership in different ways.
The other thing that Henry Ford was brilliant at that I learned through the book was the fact that he knew what he was great at and what he brought to the table. Whatever he stunk at, he got people in position. So you learn how to delegate as a leader. And I'm not trying to say I'm over here on my pedestal delivering.
No, I like what you're saying. Absolutely.
He got a band of guys, because guess what? I think he had a high school education or lower. And so when he was bringing his business out, a lot of people were yip and saying, who is this guy? He's not college educated. He shouldn't be a leader. We shouldn't listen to him. He doesn't know anything. So he addressed it like, look, if I don't know something, someone on my team is going to answer that question. Don't come to me with the finance problem because I'm not the finance guy. I'm the one figuring out how to do this assembly line deal. Let me go over here and do it. Oh, you want to talk about vision for marketing? Talk to this guy. He's our marketing director. I'm not. And that's just, when I heard that and read that in the book, I was like, wow. Because I think so many times people try to be everything, great at everything. You got to really be the best in what you can be, and then really bring on these other great people.
And bring on real smart people. If you're not, if you're confident that you're not going to be just, lose your job to these smart people, just bring on the smartest people and empower them to do all of the decision making.
Right. And they'll respect you because if you communicate 100%. Well with them, you understand with empathy, they know, hey, I'm brought in to deliver on something that maybe Mike doesn't have yet. And I like him as a leader because he's going to get us to where we need to go. And
you're building trust. You're building trust. And I'd also say be a coach. Don't be a disciplinary. Don't
inspire people. Don't motivate because you can motivate someone to go and fill this cup of coffee and come back. Oh, whoop-de-doo, they did it. They're not going to want to do it again. But I can inspire someone to want to go and do something and they have fulfillment, then they're going to want to go and do it again.
Beautiful, Mike. So I got a rec open for you, Mike, just saying.
I appreciate it. Here's what I want to pick your brain with a couple more questions. Who are some personal influences or inspirations in your life, people that actually you worked with, whether it's an aunt, uncle, grandfather, someone that brought you to who you are today? Throw out some love and appreciation for true people that helped you get to who you are today.
Sure. So without starting to, tear up, there's no question it starts at home with family. Leadership in the loving family, mother and father, great loving sisters. I was lucky. I was the young boy and two older sisters. So they a bit, the Italian household. I was the sort of little one that walked on water, but I never didn't appreciate it. And my father always had to earn respect. So it starts at home, but it doesn't have to start at home for everybody. So it's really where you found your role models growing up, or who it is that you may have emulated, or who you found really interesting. One of the early influences on me was Ray Kurzweil. And for those of you who don't know Ray, I think he was responsible for some of the breakthroughs in digitization of music. And he did some practical things around the Kurzweil keyboard that people resonate with that name. But what Ray is most noted for is really a futuristic way of thinking about the laws of accelerated returns and what that really means. And without getting into the details, it's how much compute power, whether it's Moore's law or you look at all these exponential return laws. And I always, it always resonated what Kurzweil was saying, because that's the true laws around why things can happen, which are seemingly impossible today. But as you apply the logarithmic growth, the exponential growth, you can see that things can rapidly switch in your favor.
Wow.
So whether it be the sort of mapping of the human genome is a great example. We thought it was an impossible task. We put $1 billion on it and 10 years for the government to map the first human genome. So a decade-long project and $1 billion. And in the beginning, it just crawled along. It hardly made any impact. After 3 or 4 years, though, it started to turn. So people after 4 or 5 years said, we'll never do this. Scuttle it, kill it. It'll never happen. The laws of accelerated returns suggest that if you double, you go from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64. When you're in that math, if you remember the old
penny, isn't it like a penny? You put a penny in, and then if you,
there's an old, if you put a grain of sand on a checkerboard, by the time you finish the checkerboard, you have a mountain of sand. So, I mean, so what happened was the human genome actually came in early and under budget around the 8th year, if I recall that properly. And what I learned from Ray Kurzweil is, and this applies to compute power, It applies to internet adoption. It'll apply to autonomous vehicles. It applies to electric vehicles. I've always applied his laws of accelerated returns very early on to what we would think are doing unimaginable things. Unimaginable things. So you can't even imagine what we're going to imagine in the future. We're actually going to attain this. Like, this is, to me, telepathy. You know, what is telepathy? You could read somebody's mind from 5,000 miles away.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I could easily read their mind. I could chat with them. I could tell what's on their video. So we nailed telepathy. We nailed levitation with superconductivity. We're going to nail space flight. We had nailed autonomous vehicles. We nailed everything we set our mind to, and that's been a great inspiration.
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm understanding it too from kind of a smaller business impact. So when you feel that you have a problem right now that seems impossible to solve, talking about the small guy, right? Yep. Business owner, solopreneur, you have a problem, you say, man, it's impossible for me to get to where I'm going, right? Not saying you should ever have that mentality. I think that's a poor attitude right out of the gates. But if you feel that it doesn't exist yet for you to make it happen, the technology's not there. Well, that's the thing. Today, it's impossible. But in 5 years, Tritium puts out a product that didn't exist yet. So now all of a sudden, there's a hole in your plan that is filled. And then 7 plans later, the adaptation of that plan has another hole in it that some technology created comes in. And now you have a ladder that didn't exist in 1980, but in 2021, the ladder's built. So you can now crank out that you can solve that problem that someone in 1980 said is impossible, because the ladder is built over time. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, the ladder's built in the S curves, and it's a hard concept, but for the entrepreneurs, a long, long time ago, the adoption of, say, landline telephone started a really slow growth, and then that S curve took a really long time, and then it leveled out eventually. But that's still pretty good. And then in time, those S curves get more steep. Today, these S curves look like they're climbing a wall, and then they level out. So as the convergence of, and this is a lot of Ray's concepts, it's a lot of other folks' concepts too. I should give them credit, but in time, all these disruptive innovations now converge at the same time. So you get disruptive innovation with disruptive innovation, and you get the ripple effect of disruptive innovations. And one of the things I speak about all the time is the powerhouse trio of DC fast charging, battery technology, storage technology, and renewable energy. That's the powerhouse trio, because that's the ripple effect. As each one of those technologies is going through its dramatic upturn, those technologies converging rapidly together means we're going to have complete decentralized energy. You'll produce power in your home, power in your vehicle to go as far as you want, as fast as you want. DC charging will be everywhere. You won't have to think about it. It'll be what we call true energy freedom. Today, we don't think about a gas station. We do have to think about where we're going to plug in. In the future, we won't have to think about where we plug in. It'll be ubiquitous, and it'll be powered by the sun.
Super exciting to think about where in 100 years, when people think about DC, it's like just, nothing, right? It's going to be an everyday use.
We hopefully we'll take it for granted. We'll literally take it for granted. And that's the vision of Tritium, and why we believe that this company will be tremendously successful, because we're going to add a pretty significant value in deploying all these in order to help people adopt these vehicles and literally change our carbon footprint and move forward as humanity. It's that big.
Awesome, man. This has been an interesting conversation for me, because there's information I'm learning that I did not know. There's a lot that I wanted to dive into. Plus, we're learning about leadership. It's just a really cool conversation. And I just want to thank Mike for being here. And guys, check out Tritium again at tritiumcharging.com. And you can connect with Mike also on LinkedIn. I believe we did that as well.
Please do.
And 2 last questions, and I'm going to let you get off to the rest of your day. Enjoy the sunshine while you still have it. What I'd like you to do, and this is really tied back to my purpose of why I do this show, is to inspire my audience to be brave and bold in pursuit of their dreams. What would you tell them to do that?
Yeah, I would say definitely find something that you're personally passionate about, because that's going to give you all that pickup in the bad days. It's going to launch you on the good days. It's very common that people will take a situation, a position, or career trajectory in order to fulfill another really important passion. And I think that is absolutely fine. If you have a certain passion and your job is to support that passion, fantastic. But if you can somehow align your passion with what you happen to be doing in your career goals, either within a company paying a salary or as an entrepreneur, you're going to be that much more successful. And why? Why? Because you're going to be happy. At the end of the day, this is, it's going to make you happy. And what's happiness fuel. Is different
that's
things.
Fuel you don't need, like that.
That's
fuel
right.
Is never ending fuel.
That's right. Let's say this, Elon Musk still works his butt off. He's the richest guy in the world right now, between him and Bezos. Bezos works his butt off. They don't do it for the money. Entrepreneurs rarely do it for the money.
Yeah.
And so the money will come, that you'll get rewarded with your efforts if you do something that you love. And not everybody's capable of doing it, but I don't care what level it is. Even if it's, and I mean this in a sincere, positive way, how well you put a piece of lettuce on the hamburger. Even that is how much pride you take in what you do. That's just as important as it is as to how good the brakes are on a Tesla.
Sure.
It's that important that you take pride in whatever you do at any level, and make sure that you're happy in doing it, because ultimately when you're happy, you will drive relentlessly to see things happen around you. And then I would add a little of this. You can either choose to be an externalizer or an internalizer, meaning I own it or it's their fault. I know a lot of people are still externalizers. Oh, it was that person's fault. Oh, that cop shouldn't have been there. Oh, they didn't deliver this on time. Just own your stuff. Own it. And if you own it,
your
it
team's going to make you look
good.
Yeah, the team's going to make you look good when they're doing things that you maybe just help deploy, but they're actually doing it, and you get the trophy, right? Because the company's doing well and it's in Forbes. And then there's going to be times when you clean up a big mess and really you could have started finger pointing, making the scene, and you just internalize it and say, you know what, I misguided on this one, whatever. And you kind of take. Football coaches do a really good job of this.
Absolutely.
Right? Like and their quarterback throws 5 interceptions in the game, and the head coach has to answer for it.
Poorly coached game.
They're not going to say like the guy's a joke and I'm going to cut him tomorrow. They're gonna say, hey, we could have come out with a better game plan. And
that's awesome. That's a great sports analogy. And then so internalize, own your stuff, and at the end of the day, you could choose to be a pessimist or an optimist. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a choice. Yeah, period. It's a choice. I like to say, my cup is like overflowing. It's not even just a half full. It's like overflowing. Some people are it's like, oh, my cup is half empty. Oh, it's not even half empty. It's a quarter empty, and here's why. Okay, fine. If you want to live your life that way, I'm not saying everyone's going to be happy. You have to look at facts and reality and embrace them. But it's just simply more fun.
Mike, if someone's listening to this right now and they're not happy, here's the cool part about it. And the only thing I can say is, unless there's medically a reason or something else going on, but right now, if someone's listening to this and they're not happy, you can change it. You can do something.
Absolutely. And it's fleeting. We all have good and bad days. It's fleeting. Happiness is fleeting. Right. But you got to at least know that you can stay optimistic about. Think about, we live in a wonderful world. As much problems as we have, we're solving them. What was just a few months ago, which was a pretty dark moment in America, and I'm not even making a political statement, is now this bright moment in America where poets are on the Super Bowl and we're doing great things. And so it can change. And you don't blame, you own. Right. And I think we'll do well as leaders, as entrepreneurs, as small business, as people aspiring to do careers, or even folks who are relegated to doing something passionate for their family and giving up their career. Keep your happiness and your optimism high, and it'll pay off. The karma is there.
Yeah, Mike, I could talk to you all day because there's so much. There's leadership. There's your whole entire career. There's the EV stuff. There's things we can talk about with Buffalo and sports and the whole deal. The last thing I'm going to have you talk about, and then we're going to wrap up. I always end my emails with be great and be grateful. It's something I truly believe. What I mean by that is you're going to go and do something. You're going to create it. It's a business. It's an idea. You're going to play a sport. You're going to be a father, whatever you're doing in the moment. Why would you do it half-assed? Why put the lettuce on the burger? You just said it. Why would you do that half-assed? So my be great means do the best you can every single time. And then the be grateful is if you're able to do that, man, just be in a state of gratitude and appreciate it. Don't take it for granted. What are 3 things you're most grateful for?
Grateful for, number one is health. And like health comes and goes too. But I believe that if you stay focused on your body, and we don't always do it, I don't always do it, but I'm very grateful that I'm here talking about all these other things. But the most I'm grateful for is that, I'm healthy. And I think, my father was a great example of that. And I find it funny. He found it funny. He beat cancer, a heart attack, emphysema, Alzheimer's, and something else in there. And you'd never know it. It's like all those. And he lived in almost 90. How did you, wait a minute. Well, it's a little something. I have a little procedure. And he never let on.
Yeah.
It's like, Doc, did I have a heart attack? And the doc said, no, you're having one now. And it's like, but he just it rolled off his back. And that's not easy at all. No. I'm not making that overly simple. COVID is a great reminder of how very difficult it is and how we could succumb to things we can't control and we think we can control them. But I would say we have to be thankful that we have an opportunity here on this planet, that we get to literally exist.
Yeah.
And that we can share that existence with others. And that's really more important than anything. After that, it's, having food on the table. I'm not making this understated. Having food on the table, having shelter, those are the basic needs. You can do amazing things if you have those set up. And if you can't get those set up, find ways to solve those problems as a first step. Don't lament, don't blame, figure it out, do the math, like at the end of Martian for the impossible task. And to be on your way to good success and happiness. And of course, I'm always tremendously grateful for my daughters and my family, my sisters. And I told you I'd get teared up on that one.
That's beautiful.
Of course.
Because you have a heart beating in your chest, and I can feel it when you're talking about your business, the way you got there, and the family. And here's the thing, just to wrap up and kind of add one more bullet point to gratitude, is you said, look, food on the table, right? Family, you talked about, and health. Well, guess what, guys, listening to this, right? You could be the president of Tritium, right? In the North Americas, like Mike is. You could be Elon Musk. You could be driving, name the car, and you have it show up in your driveway a snap of the fingers. That's great. Guess what? You take away your health, none of that matters anymore. Because if I told someone who seemingly on paper had everything in the world, and I told you got a half hour to live, what good is it? So you got to be present, live. I'm not trying to add to your own.
No, I think it's great. It's a great adder.
But grateful for literally having the opportunity to be here, to exist with any level of health, just to say, hey, we're here. Let's freaking enjoy it, right? And I enjoyed this hour and however long we've been going, because Mike, I could talk to you all day. This has been something we've had planned for a long time, and life, certain events got in the way of it. And you stuck with me, and I really appreciate you being on the show and delivering that information, because I know you don't just have an hour and a half of time sitting around in your calendar. Thanks for being here. What would you like to say? Any last words to our audience?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thanks again, Mike. I appreciate it. It was enjoyable, and it's a nice forum to be able to share, what's up here, but also what's deep down inside. And I would just like to say, we're all blessed, regardless of where we are on the spectrum of health, the spectrum of wealth, and the spectrum of loneliness or with people. We're all are so blessed to be able to have our earth here and us existing in it. It's finite amount of time. And so enjoy every moment, stay present and stay in the moment. Let the problems that you've had, shed those in the past. Don't look in the future too much. It might feel anxious. Don't look in the past too much. You'll never be as young as you used to be. And don't let that manifest in some depression. Stay very much focused in the present. Stay blessed. That's the way I often end my little signatures is stay blessed.
Stay blessed.
I also, on occasion, will cite Lenny Kravitz as "Let love rule."
I love that
because that's at the end of it, we're all humans, and this is all for us to enjoy or destroy, and that's why I'm in this for the long term to enjoy our world. Yeah, man.
Guess what?
How about that?
That's what's holding up my microphone. "Let Love Rule" by Lenny Kravitz.
That is a perfect ending there, Mike. How cool.
Can you hear me okay? I just was tinkering.
Yes. By the way, I did not know that about Mike, so that was not planned. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Lenny Kravitz is one of my favorite musicians, soulful singers, guitar players. He writes and records everything. And in that song, my daughter and I, we sing it when we're cruising around in the car because I want to let her know that this whole world, number one thing we need to do, you want to end racism, you want to end all these different things, love, man. It's as simple as that. Like when you love each other the way that, you love your family, the way you love your neighbor, it sounds like it's so difficult. I really, as a kid, had such a hard time understanding why peace between nations was so difficult when I was like, just, like, why can't we get along with the other guys? And there's all these other reasons in politics, and that's a whole nother show. But at the end of the day, just let love rule.
Perfect. Well, thanks.
Thank you so much, Mike. Mike Calise, Tritium, you guys are doing big things. I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. And I'm just honored to call you a friend.
Thank you, friend. I appreciate it. This has been great. And I look forward to saying hi in the future. Thank you.
Hey guys, this is Mike, and I wanted to personally thank you for tuning in, for being part of my journey. Together we can make a positive impact in the world. A shout out to everyone who's been tuning in. I love reading your feedback and appreciate the reviews on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and the messages that have been coming in on social media as well. I love you guys. Thank you so much for making this journey as much fun as it's been so far. I'm doing what I love, and it's awesome to hear that it's showing up in the podcast. If you haven't left a review yet, it's greatly appreciated if you do. And of course, if you share any content on social as well, I see it all and I appreciate you helping me spread the love. You can check out more show notes and information at miceduppodcast.com, MIKED uppodcast.com, powered by Social Chameleon. You know what to do. Be great and be grateful.